Now, over the last 5 years while producing this show, Living in Fort Collins, I've given you guys tons of personal opinions about what it's like living in Fort Collins. But today, we're going to go over what it is like living in Fort Collins according to the people of Fort Collins. We just had the 2025 survey done in the city of Fort Collins. Over 4,400 postcards and responses were sent out, and just over 900 total responses came in. And the responses came from people who owned homes, rented homes, old, young, students, northeast side of town, southeast side of town, central east, central west. It was a great array of responses that came in. But overall, today, we are going to talk to you about what it's like living in Fort Collins according to the people of Fort Collins. My name is Patrick Soukup, and this is the Living in Fort Collins YouTube channel, where you come to learn everything there is to know about Fort Collins, eating, sleeping, playing, and what it's like living here according to the people who have lived here. Additionally, the people who have responded have lived here for 0 to 2 years, up to 20 or more years. So again, the perspectives are great to understand, and the responses were tabulated and statistically relevant responses. That's something important to know. Now, if you're considering moving here, give my team a call, text, or email. We have helped hundreds of families move to the area, or if it's more convenient for you, if you're watching this on TV, scan the QR code here. It'll take you to a Zoom call. Super easy, convenient, a great way to start that process. Now, if you have any questions or anything along those lines, definitely feel free to comment or send us an email. We'd be happy to answer those. But let's not delay any further and let's get going. Here we go. Now, the first thing to notice is that 87% of the respondents said that the quality of life is good to very good. So that is the biggest driver of people moving here is, again, quality of life. It's a lifestyle decision to move here. So the people who have lived here in Fort Collins or who are living here in Fort Collins are supporting that claim. Nearly 9 in 10 people would recommend to someone else to live here or are planning on living here for 5 or more years. I would suggest that's a pretty good number, saying that, hey, we like Fort Collins and we can see ourselves or family, friends moving here and loving it as well. Now, I want to read this one exactly the way that it was wrote, because this is the promotion of social health of Fort Collins. This is human services, affordable housing, homelessness, equity, and inclusion. And we came in at 41% believe that we're doing good or very good, which is the highest it's been since 2019. Actually, it's highest it's been in years. So that's something that I think Fort Collins is definitely working on. City Council has priorities on. It's clear that it's a focus and something that the citizens of Fort Collins can see, at least our intentionality behind that. Now, where is Fort Collins doing well? And this one comes in to me and to others who have commented in regards to my reference to this is safety. Nearly 9 in 10 people feel overall safe in Fort Collins, which I think is tremendous, especially for us raising family, young kids, driving around. My wife, she gave me a lot of shit when we were first starting to date, because we'd pull up in my car and I would leave my wallet in the center console, my phone out, and she was like, "What are you doing? Put it under the seat. Don't invite people in to break in." And I was like, my dad to this day still has his door unlocked 90% of the time. Now, I wouldn't necessarily suggest leaving your wallet out on the center console or your front door unlocked. Definitely take those precautionary steps, but the feeling is that there is a overall safe feeling in Fort Collins. Now, we've had some big jumps from last year's response, which was the feeling of safety at night, both citywide, 8% higher than last year, and the safety of downtown 7% higher than last year. And then riding transport is again +7. Now, I can speak to all three of those real quickly. Of course, citywide, as I just talked about, at night, definitely there are different areas. The big focus is downtown, so I'm glad that that's kind of its own little scale, because when you're downtown at night, depending on where you're at and what time of the night it is, yeah, sure, the level of safety might kind of jump or fall on that scale. But overall, if you're downtown before 10 o'clock, and it's extremely well lit, even the alleyways, they're all gorgeous, they're all beautifully lit. It's a very safe place. It feels very secure for me and my family when we're walking around downtown. But of course, if you're going down a dark alley at 1 a.m., it's probably you're inviting trouble. And so I would say, so long as you're not inviting trouble, you're probably going to steer clear of it. Riding the transport, again, my family and I actually just went down to Tour de Fat, and we thought it'd be a fun opportunity for us to take the Max Transit. And so we parked our car at the South Transit Center, jumped on the Max Transit, and went down and then came back that evening. Very safe, very secure, clean, well kept. And it was a relatively quick drive. So I can support all three of those, and I'm glad that the city of Fort Collins feels the same. Now, what is it like living in the neighborhood? I would say, or I should say the citizens said that 86% feel good about the quality of the neighborhood that they live in. And then from there, I think it's a no-brainer that people feel connected to parks, trails, and their community members around them. And how about transportation? We are an extremely bike-friendly city. 85% of people say that they feel very good about the bikeability of Fort Collins. We actually just had somebody reach out to us and said, hey, we're big bikers, we're coming from Florida, and that is a big factor in our decision is the bikeability of Fort Collins. Well, platinum rated bike community, over 280 miles of trails with nearly 70 more miles of paved trails coming along in the near future, next to 20 to 40 years, depending on how much taxes we can collect. Overall, just a very safe community. And then we've got other places like Windsor, Loveland that are also very focused on that bikeability. So it's a very interconnected Northern Colorado feel. And then from there, we had big gains in street maintenance, 10% higher, airport shuttle, 13% higher. I will say that we've had a lot of good success with family and friends that are taking Groom Shuttle or Landline. Quick, easy, affordable, easy access from Harmony Transit Center. We have public transit ease plus 13%, and then EV charging, one of the largest jumps of 17% versus last year. Overall, it's interesting because I think, on our lives recently, we've been talking about how Fort Collins is extremely intentional about its carbon emissions by neutrality by 2030. Not necessarily going to get there, but we're working very hard towards it. Just had a 1,400 acre phase 1 Black Hollow solar power, as well as a battery charging facility being approved through the second reading. So the intentionality behind clean energy in Fort Collins is absolutely there, and the people of Fort Collins are feeling it and seeing it. Of course, trails and parks, we've got 70 community parks, we've got over 40 neighborhood parks, nearly, I think it's 1,000 acres of parks in Fort Collins. So that's a no-brainer as well. Just those things are really shining through as far as our amenities and how people feel about the livability of neighborhoods in Fort Collins. But how does people feel about the city staff at the City of Fort Collins? I thought it was really interesting. Recently, we were at a dinner at CSU, and a friend came up, started talking to us, and we somehow got, of course, onto real estate. And he was talking about a remodel that they were doing at their house, and that he called into the City of Fort Collins, the permit department, and was expecting a call back within 24 hours and got a call back within 20 minutes. And he thought that that was really awesome that the city staff was on top of it. There are a lot of people who feel very good about our city services, and nearly 9 in 10 believe that city staff is prompt, courteous, and knowledgeable about what they are talking about. So that was a really great firsthand experience of somebody having a good experience with the city staff at the City of Fort Collins. So if you move here, it's an engaged community, still small, much bigger than what it was when I grew up here, but still very much a small community feel and the intentionality behind that. All right, where is Fort Collins struggling? Because no city is perfect, and a lot of people, I'm actually surprised, to be honest with you. Not that the people who responded, there was 4,400 surveys put out, over 900 that came in as far as responses, and across the gamut as far as who responded. But I think, I did read some of the actual written responses, and those kind of were what I was expecting on some of the conversations, and kind of people who respond to these generally feel a high emotion or an extremely low emotion. And some are, of course, wanting to be productive and helpful to the city. So I was actually surprised that we didn't get just more negativity on some of these surveys. But overall, only 1 in 10 say that housing is affordable in Fort Collins. From there, fewer than 2 in 10 that think that childcare is affordable in Fort Collins. I will say there is tons of different options, whether you do, an in-home daycare with other kids at somebody's house. That can be relatively affordable, between $300 to $500. Well, probably at this point now, it's probably increased a little bit, probably $400 to $600, depending on how many hours and how many days you're going. And then from there, you can do, of course, like an in-person daycare, 5 days a week, and you can reach up $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 per month. For us, our kid's in first preschool. He's doing 3 days a week, about 4 hours a day, and that's about $500 per month. So definitely think it's my sister gave me a great comment. She said, when her youngest son went into kindergarten, so no more childcare for them, she felt like she got a pretty significant raise. So unfortunately, that is an extremely expensive part about raising kids is childcare. And Fort Collins, Larimer County is actually trying to pass a bill right now. We'll find out November 4th if it goes through, but they want to add a tax to help with affordability of childcare. So that'll be interesting to see if that in fact passes and gets approved. Now, job opportunities. I've talked about it time and time again that Fort Collins is an amazing place to live. Some great employers here. In fact, we just released a video about who the employers are in Northern Colorado and what industries are here. But overall, 3 in 4 people believe that Fort Collins is a good place to work, which is great. But only 1 in 3 believe that there are good job opportunities available in Fort Collins. And I would say there's probably a good amount of job opportunities available, but it's the high paying jobs that maybe are a little bit few and far between. So that being said, I do think that Fort Collins needs to focus, and some of the survey responses on like how the city views our economic health and business environment, and it's not as high as I would like to see it. That being said, I do know that our current mayor, who is not going to be our mayor after November 4th because she's not going to be running again, she thought that it was imperative that Fort Collins, especially for small business, put a larger spotlight on it to allow for the success of these small businesses. Change of use, permitting process, licensing, all of the above. She believed that Fort Collins needs to do a little bit better job on helping small business. And then finally, growth management. Only 4 in 10 people believe that we are handling growth management well. We are a growing city and a growing region. We're expected to be at a population of around 250,000 by 2050. So an extra 70,000 people over the next 25 years. And that's a lot of growth. That's a significant amount of growth, nearly 50% additional people here in the area. A lot of that's going to be on the northeast side of Fort Collins and southeast too. But that being said, the beauty of Fort Collins has been this small town charm, the safety of Fort Collins, the cleanliness of Fort Collins, overall a good place to live, the bikeability, all of those wonderful things about a smaller community while we're still expected to grow, and especially the Front Range, Timnath, Wellington, Windsor, Severance, Loveland, Berthoud, Johnstown, you name it, they're all growing pretty rapidly. And the hope is that we can maintain a cool, great, small town character with the amenities of a big city. So we'll see how we do moving forward. Now, the company that the city of Fort Collins employed to do this survey has surveys done in over 400 communities. Actually, she suggested while she was talking that they actually did it for over 500 communities. Now, that being said, how does Fort Collins stack up against the 400 communities as well as the communities along the Front Range? Well, compared to the national cities, there's 47 areas that they do similar, 3 areas that we scored higher on, and 3 that we scored lower on. I'll tell you those here shortly. And then compared to the Front Range, 37 that we scored similar on, and 17 that we scored higher on. Now, what exactly were those? All right. Now, this is against the national averages. Areas that we scored higher on. Natural areas and open space, 93% positive, much higher. Parks overall, quality of recreational opportunities, availability of quality healthcare, volunteering your time in the community, ease of travel by bicycle, street maintenance, carpooling, overall city appearance, and quality of shopping opportunities. Interesting to see that on quality of shopping opportunities, because that's one thing that I have talked not at length about, but definitely have mentioned that there's not that many shopping opportunities. It just must be that the other 400 communities maybe don't on average have as good of shopping opportunities. We do have Old Town Square, which is just absolutely phenomenal. Front Range Village. Hopefully the mall comes back through. So we'll see there. Now, how about Fort Collins, where they ranked lower in the national average? Availability of affordable, quality childcare. Availability of affordable, quality housing. Talking to or visiting with immediate neighbors. And then actually, we had, and then police services overall also ranked lower. So there was actually 4 that ranked lower. I thought it was super interesting as far as talking to or visiting with immediate neighbors, because it also kind of is compared against the overall feel of neighborhoods, which is good, which is positive. But I'm a real estate agent in Fort Collins and have been in the real estate world since 2009 in some form or fashion, full time since really 2012, 13, brokering deals since 2013. And I've lived in my neighborhood since 2016. And I know probably of my immediate neighbors, like 70%. There's still 30% of my neighbors, and I've lived here for, nearly a decade, that I don't know. Now, definitely some of that is on me, some of that's on them. I think we have talked with clients and friends who have cul-de-sacs, where they have cul-de-sac parties, neighborhood parties, where their neighbors are their friend group and they absolutely love each other. So I do think there's some intentionality that needs to happen, but overall, people, I think are homebodies. They tend to themselves, unless you get lucky, unless you get kind of maybe that, that individual who's kind of a vanguard to break against barriers, and you just happen to start to build relationships and people do fun things in their neighborhood. So I thought that was really interesting. Now, finally, how did we do against the Front Range? So our neighbors, Denver, Boulder, other communities up and down, Colorado Springs, up and down the Front Range. Well, we scored higher on 17 and didn't score lower on any. So that's a good sign. But where did we score higher? Public school quality, community openness to diversity, parks overall and natural areas, open space, ease of bicycle travel, walking, public transit, EV charging, and airport shuttle. Fort Collins as a place to work, shopping, dining, and entertainment opportunities, quality healthcare availability. And then Fort Collins had no areas that it ranked lower than the Front Range. So, overall, Fort Collins is a great place to live. It's got good job working environments, but not a lot of job opportunities. It was interesting when she started talking about police services across the nation. People just don't rank police services very high. So that's kind of par for the course, so to speak. Affordability of housing as well as childcare are where we score the lowest on. So one thing that we're excited about is getting our little ones out of childcare and into kindergarten. So we got 2 years left of that, but it's expensive for sure. And housing, it was interesting to see kind of a juxtaposition too of who scored housing as far as affordability or not affordable. And those that own houses definitely leaned towards more the affordability of housing is good, and those that rented said no, affordability of housing is poor. So that is something that the city of Fort Collins is trying to work on. It is definitely a function of supply and demand. It's a great place to live. A lot of people want to be here. Fewer people want to move out, so that kind of imbalance keeps pressure on prices. So that's something that is a challenge across the nation, not excluding Fort Collins. Now that is how Fort Collins does according to Fort Collins. Now this is a pretty extensive report. So if there is any specific areas or data that you would like to see, if you're like, hey, listen, how does somebody who owns a house, makes $125,000 a year, 37 years old, and is a college graduate who lives in the northeast side of Fort Collins, how do they view the overall quality of life in Fort Collins? Well, you can kind of dial in and put all of those numbers so you can kind of see like, okay, well, this is my avatar, this is who I am, and this is how this demographic feels about living in Fort Collins. So if there are any of those specific questions, definitely feel free to reach out and ask. Otherwise, if you are considering relocating to the area, give my team a call, text, or email, or scan the QR code, wherever we're putting that. And appreciate you guys watching. And until next time, everybody, take care.